Alrighty, we are here once again. It is Tuesday, April 15th. I'm here with Chase. A lot has happened since last time we spoke.
Oh,
We spoke about a little bit about tariffs last time around. This time around, um, sending American citizens to El Salvador is next on the Trump plan or takeover of the United States. It seems as though he is ready to go and send criminals there instead of keeping them here in the United States. And then wanted to talk a little bit about AOC and Bernie Sanders and their Stop Oligarchy tour. So which one do you want to start off with, Chase? You know what? I always lead these with the questions of saying like getting right into it. Which one do you want to talk about right now?
I think we'll go with the dark, more apocalyptic takes first, and then we can kind of get end up in like that we're not powerless, I guess, at the end with that. Maybe
Okay.
a little bit more hopeful
So
compared to what's
So
happening.
Donald Trump has said that he wants to potentially start, not potentially, he said that he wants to start sending American citizens to El Salvador and their prisons, saying that there are really bad people here, and then citing a couple of examples such as people pushing individuals on the subway and hitting elderly women in the back of the head with baseball bats, um, which are obviously all bad things. Chase and I would denounce all any form of violence, but um, when does it stop or where does it stop? With Donald Trump, it doesn't seem like he is someone who really follows the court of law. He doesn't follow any rules. He makes up his own. Um, is there potentially a fear that he starts sending American citizens that don't necessarily agree with his speech, like he's doing with, permanent residents right now? Is there like any type of fear that something like that starts to happen?
I mean, I think that's basically, I mean, to kind of cover the meeting with Bukele is, it was at first a hot mic caught Trump saying that the homegrowns are next, and you need to build five more prisons for them, which is a lot of prisons. So it seems like we're going to be sending a lot of people and spending a lot of money. I mean, we already have $6 million spent there. I can't imagine that it's going to be, super cheap to just throw send people there. I'm sure they'll make some argument about cheaper than here, but I do think, selling our prisoners or like renting out our prisoners to other people so they get money just seems a little weird. Um, but I think with that, it's if they're criminals, okay, we can have a little bit of a conversation of whether they belong here.
Hmm.
How do you prove that? There's no due process with most of these 25, I think the 250 individuals that they sent already. We already hear about instances of possible innocent people who, you know, just were taken on, a few bases of like tattoos and they're Venezuelan, which, seems to me to be just like racial profiling with that. But
Yeah.
I think, you know, the, the ability of or the lack of ability to kind of make Trump do anything is also a concern because the Supreme Court in some ways is power is directly being challenged by this. And that's a threat to not just undocumented immigrants, but Americans as at large. In this call, he says the homegrowns are next, and then it's kind of cut off. And that's usually something that you would hear from the little hot mic session, right? But then he doubles down in the actual televised section saying, what do you think American citizens are like a special category of person? Which kind of shows you the whole bit, and I feel like Bukele and Trump would do the same maneuver with an American citizen. I can't get him back. I can't get him back. It is interesting how these men who say they're so strong and they're so powerful and they're able to get rid of all these criminals off the street can't correct their errors or their wrongs. You know, that Bukele said, "Why would I? I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't let a terrorist back out. We
Hmm.
don't like terrorists." Well, how have you haven't proved anything? And beyond that, I don't think we should be taking advice from someone who's suspended all civil liberties in their country and is like basically a cosplaying dictator because I mean his outfits are insane. Like this man, you have to check it out. I'm telling you, he's cosplaying as somebody like some tough guy, like a Darth Vader vibe of somebody who's like a futuristic techno crypto dictator, right? I mean, he was all real big in crypto. And you know, these are the people that we're buddying up with. These are the policies that we're kind of endorsing or partnering with. Um, and you know, I think it's very concerning where it's going because if they can do this to somebody else, they can do this to you, especially if they revoke due process and say, you know what, nope, you know, up the plane's already left, we can't get them back. Um, I mean, they're going to use it. They're going to try to get away with it because people have already let them get away with deporting people who really shouldn't be deported. There's, you know, questions on whether they should be deported, and beyond that, there's a process for this. There is a legal process for this, and there's a reason for that legal process. And I think, you know, when you begin to kind of make excuses for the legal process to break down, you basically have, I mean, just constant constitutional crises in some ways.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. I think it's funny that you brought up where he started to deport people based off their tattoos, right? Like we saw someone who had a tattoo um for his like brother who had cancer get deported, and then like this gay stylist get deported. There doesn't seem to be any. I think the good news is there doesn't seem to be any true rhyme or reason. It just seems like they're picking off anybody that looks Hispanic and throwing them in trucks and deporting them. So I think that's what's so interesting to me is like there isn't any due process. There isn't any, let's try to see, like, for example, if somebody's here claiming asylum, because I mean we've also heard that people are asylum seekers are also getting pulled off before their cases are even heard. There's no real rhyme or reason to this. It just seems like they're going after anyone and everyone, which is, like I said, it's very concerning. But I mean, I thought it was very promising to see that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 against them. Like everyone was on one page regarding that case. Uh, and I think that just shows that like where Trump is in terms of like a lot of Republican voters now too, is like, I mean, even very conservative Supreme Court justices are siding against him rather than with him. Um, but with Donald Trump and he's one of those people that he acts now and then asks for forgiveness later. Do you think there is any way to stop him before he does anything, or do you think that he just continues to act and then beg for forgiveness later and not rectify his mistakes?
I mean, I think Republicans seem committed to going down with the ship. And you know,
Yeah,
uh, whether they support certain things or not, you know, it's not a debate about your view of the country or the direction of the country. It's about the literal Constitution and everything that kind of stems from that, the whole legal process in some ways. And you know, I think if he starts now, God only knows what's going to happen by 2028 when he's saying he's going to run again, and there's the
yeah,
question of the Constitution, you know, being the issue,
yeah,
right? Like there is no stopping it because how does the Supreme Court actually enforce anything?
right.
How? I mean, they could hold him in somebody within the White House in contempt, but do you think that anyone's going to execute that. I mean, you're going to have a standoff in some ways. And I think if the Supreme Court was smart, they would put their foot down in some ways now because as soon as you start giving in, Trump's going to demand more and more and more. And it's who even if Trump doesn't stay there, you're setting a precedent for presidents to pick and choose based on their personal agendas, basically, it seems,
Hmm.
who you can deport. And, whether certain rights apply to certain people, I think I can't help but tie um, the deportations of innocent or, um, not charged people to places, and then also the charging of people with terroristic claims and things like that for simply writing an op-ed that the state disagrees with.
Hmm.
Sitting there siding with an idea. I mean, these are people who have said that conservative voices have been oppressed and conservative voices were, being silenced. And now they're willingly deporting people for things that they say and citing, Jews or anti-Semitic identity with that when, a lot of people on that side have those same views. Like there's still concerning issues there. And I think, what you have basically is the weaponization of the state against really, you know, the ideas of the country at large, but through attacking certain segments of the population first, right? I mean, you come after immigrants because immigrants, in some ways, don't have all the legal rights, you know, as American citizens do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think I mean, we can debate if that's completely constitutional, but I mean, it's practiced basically like that. I mean, somebody literally on their day at the office about to become an American citizen gets deported. You know, uh, Masked individuals jumping out of a van and tackling a girl on the street and taking her off to who knows where.
Hmm.
I mean, this is what other dictatorships have done to people who have, acted with dissent. And I think, you know, if you're willing to go this far with this, I mean, this seems to be small beans compared to, issues of like power and things like that. But if you're willing to go all the way with even just the smallest Supreme Court orders and things like that, why wouldn't you go against the big ones? You know, I think it begins to question of like the only stoppage of that is how much they think they can politically take,
Yeah.
uh, or whether they even are worried about answering politically anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And you brought up the whole citizenship uh question. I think in the if you look in the Constitution, there's a difference between I'm blanking on it right now. It's like between uh people versus like citizens. Like there are certain rights that are endowed to citizens and then certain rights that are endowed to people. And so like there are certain like excerpts that are taking out from the Constitution when we reference like uh, people versus like actual citizens and what rights they are owed. And so like to your point, it seems like uh, that's exactly what um, the Trump administration is trying to do, and Marco Rubio is trying to do in particular, especially when it comes to these deportations, because uh, it's within his right to remove individuals that he feels threaten, if I'm not mistaken, it's peace. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but like there's an excerpt that allows the Secretary of State to remove individuals if they fear that they are a threat to like peace within the United States. And so like there's the whole conversation about citizen versus an individual and what rights that they're actually endowed. Um, and it's just, like you said, very concerning that as of right now, um, there's just so much in the air, and that it seems like they're actually going and weaponizing. the state versus the people, and taking people literally like right off of the street. Um, but I mean, this is Trump's America. We have to adjust as of right now, at least for the next 2 years, because it doesn't seem like he's going to be pumping on the brakes anytime soon. I know I have gotten used to it because I under Biden, I used to love to look at the stock market and look at my stocks and see what they're doing every day. And now under Trump, I have completely deleted the app and said this is for the long term. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at right now. But let's turn to something a little more positive. Um, Bernie Sanders and AOC are going on a tour, the Stop Oligarchy tour. They are drawing in thousands and thousands and thousands of people on their tour. Um, Elon Musk, I'm sure you've seen, has said that those are paid um, uh, not protesters, sorry, paid attendees. Um, what are your thoughts on, well, for one, Elon Musk's I guess, accusations in terms of like the people being paid to be there? And two, like, does something like this actually give you hope to say, like, okay, there are a lot of people that are finally starting to come out and uh, seemingly oppose the Trump administration?
I mean, ever since tariffs came out, I've really stopped worrying about Elon's opinion on things. But I mean, I think Elon's gonna say he tweets, nonstop, all his different conspiracy theories on different things and, you know, propping up all sorts of theories of just craziness, really.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's a lot of people to be paid, and there's a lot of paid Democrats in Idaho. I don't know. Seems a little weird. But
Find them in.
I think it shows you that people are willing to show up wherever you are and in places that you might not assume. And I think that there is a longing, even in red districts, for somebody who's actually just going to fight for them.
Yep.
And this administration, in its actions continually, don't do anything, not for the people that they say they care about, not for the country as a whole, and not for our future. They're destroying a lot of what I think has made America exceptional in certain ways. And frankly, I think they're very un-American actions. Attacking fundamental rights would be something that our founding fathers, and as flawed as they are, there was something established in America that spoke to being, or at least attempting to be better and trying to strive for that. Now, America has done a long history of failing and honestly being very similar to what we are today. Like tariffs, it's not new. Xenophobia, it's not new. Racism, it's not new. Like none of these things are new. It's part of, in some ways, unfortunately, aspects of the American identity we have to challenge and we have to kind of converse with. But I think, you know, there's things from, Idaho to Salt Lake City and Utah to, the Bronx and things like that that connect everybody as an American. And I think leaning into those things and being willing to show up for people is far more than even ideological arguments. You might not have to agree with AOC or Bernie or be as progressive as they are, but they're showing up.
Yeah.
It's no different to me than the Cory Booker sitting there and, talking for what, 25 hours. And just, there was nothing necessarily delivered with that, but there was a conversation about how it's not normal.
Yeah.
You have to have, we were talking about it before, but you have to have movement to push against this, and not just movement with people who agree with you, but people who, on the other side, a lot of Trump people are kind of looking at the things he's doing right now and saying, this doesn't seem like it's for me. This doesn't seem like it's going to deliver anything. And, some will admit it and some won't, but the on again, off again, backing off from tariffs, on again with tariffs, it's complete instability.
Yeah.
And this country is not as magnified as people think because understand something. If the stock market tanks and we're into depression, no one is going to care about Donald Trump, especially when he's tanking the stock markets and going to UFC fights or going to Mar-a-Lago and playing with his little Saudi golf tournaments, right? Like that is retirement. Just retire.
You're right.
Go and live your little life. You'll be fine. Um, you know, eh, I think that you have to grab that energy and kind of lean into it and say, you know what, I'm going to offer something and I'm going to show up and I'm going to listen. And I honestly think some, if as much as people are saying where are the Democrats, I think some are showing up. And I think we need to encourage people to show up just at these rallies and things like that, but at local town halls and things like that. They need to run for office and kind of challenge people who not will reject you know what we know to be good and what we know to be positive and lead to better days. Um, and yeah, I just think it shows you that there's a path forward to
Yeah,
be fair.
I actually, that's funny that you said that in terms of showing up, because I just realized that I haven't been paying attention if Gavin Newsom has had any new uh, controversial um, individuals on. Um, I will say that he has not. He actually, his most recent podcast was on April 4th, which is kind of insane because it seemed like he was at one point pumping them out like every
Yeah,
day.
I mean, he is also a governor, so there might have to be a little bit of governance as podcasting too. But I did you see the Andy Bashir podcast? Did you see that he also has one now?
Andy Bashir has one now.
Yes, I think it's two episodes in, but it just goes to show you that I feel like a podcast is just like it's a 2028 warning sign of you know I think yeah I think I'm seeing a lot of interesting things within democratic spheres and um just the overall feelings that people have both Trump supporters and more moderate Republicans and independents, things like that. Um, there's just a lot of energy that I think you can kind of lean into for those things and um, legislate and lead to 2026, right? Um, you have to focus your energy on the issues at hand because, Cory Booker was on NBC the other day. And they were asking him about 2028. Are you running for president? Things like that. And he was like, frankly, I don't care. That should be your approach always.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about the next elected race because you don't even know if it's going to come. You don't know if it's going to come. I mean, Trump could pull a Bukele and like, you know what, martial law.
Yeah.
And like people say, no, it can't happen here, but it happened in South Korea. They didn't expect it. You know what I'm saying? So I think being willing to understand what can come, but also understanding that like honestly, they only have as much power as you give them,
Yeah.
you know?
So speaking of Cory Booker, would love for him to start a podcast. He's also very brilliant. Um, he has like basically almost all of the same um, uh, accomplishments as Pete Buttigieg, minus the military service and speaking like 250 different languages. But I've always liked Cory Booker. Um, I do find it interesting that Andy Bouchard did create a podcast. I think that that is very interesting. However, I just realized we only have like 5 more minutes on this conversation. There was something that I did want to talk about that I actually totally forgot to throw your way. Um, Josh Shapiro's house
Oh, yes.
was, or sorry, governor's mansion was burned to a crisp. I mean, what what is your take on that? Like it's starting to get a little confusing because like right now Republicans seem to have all the power yet that they have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, they have the Supreme Court, yet they're still becoming increasingly more violent. I mean, what are your thoughts on the Josh Shapiro attack and where we are with that?
I mean, I'm not so sure that it, I mean, that it's really Republican or that, the person who did it had any sort of political lean. I mean, I think most likely, I think it was in juxtaposition with Passover and the celebration of that. So I do think Josh Shapiro's Jewish identity it was the reason that they were targeted, to be honest. Now it could, be in juxtaposition with some other conspiracy theories or something like that. But, I think it beyond just those instances occurring, I think in an increasingly unstable country, yes, people are going to and act out, and they already have been. I think when you justify crimes, and this is not just to say with this instance, but in some ways, the bombing of a Tesla, the fire bombing and things like that of Teslas, like that in itself is not that different than the burning of Josh. Obviously it's a different instance. I think a private company is a little bit less, important than a governor's house, and it's not as much of like that's a direct threat to really the stability. Whereas like there's threats to life and things like that, but overall
Well,
those will be investigated with
I
the
will
press.
say that it said on that his social media had displayed like simmering anti-government statements and memes. So he has been very opposed to Josh Shapiro and seemingly everything that he's been passing. So he is pretty anti-government. I just want to make sure that is known because that was actually shared by NBC News. I was just looking at it because I did see something that it could have been politically motivated. Now you're right; they haven't given an official reason on why, like what his motives were. But it did say that he is very anti-government and had made comments about Josh Shapiro and some of the legislation that had been passed. So just want to make sure that is known and that is thrown out there.
Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately, I think we'll probably see more instances of things like this. That there's just no way to sugarcoat it with that. That's going to be kind of reality, I think, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, people are going to be heard one way or the other, and you don't have. I'm not saying to agree with it or endorsing violence at all, but I do think that at a certain point, people all will choose violence. You know, at a certain point, revolutions and things like that happened, and a lot of times, not to say that it has to be just on that scale, but somebody's going to choose it. If if life gets a little bit rougher and things like that, like it can be hard to stay stable. I think for some people. Um, so unfortunately, in a society that like this right now, you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. Alrighty. Well, that concludes our time for today. I appreciate you as always, Chase. We will obviously reconnect next week with a new episode. Like I said, there's always something, so we'll always have something to talk about. I appreciate your time, and I will talk to you later.
Yep, sounds good.